talk about the general mechanics of how you move a canoe. We are going to temporarily disband the knowledge that we know the paddle moves through the water, for those of you that already knew that. And we are just going to think that when we plant the paddle, it stays put. Right? The reason that we want to get into that frame of mind is because, just like you said, we want to focus on moving the canoe. If you're focused on moving the paddle, that's exactly what you're going to do. You're going to move the paddle. So, even though the paddle moves, we want to focus on moving the canoe. So we are going to be under the assumption that when we plant this paddle, in our ideal scenario, it's going to stay exactly where it is. Okay, now comes the important part. When we plant it and it stays exactly where it is, we need to have it in a very specific position. So again, I'm not going to talk about technique or hand positioning or shoulder positioning or body positioning. What I'm going to talk about is I'm going to talk about the paddle itself relative to what's happening. When you're generating the force, right, you're applying the force to the paddle, and you want that force then to make your canoe move forward. Everybody's agreed upon that. When you're applying it, however your technique does it, where that force comes out is it comes out the blade face. That force is going to move directly perpendicular to your blade face. Alright? So, and when that force moves directly perpendicular to your blade face, your canoe is going to move in direct opposite to that. So it's going to be polar opposite. So if we got it like this, that means our canoe is moving this way. So if I set my paddle like this, where's the force going? What direction? Where's the canoe going? Up. I go like this. Where's the force going? Canoe's going? If it's like this, where's the force going? Where's the canoe going?
Nowhere.
Of those three positions, which one do I never want to have happen? You got it. You got it. So, again, undeniable truth is we want to spend as much time in what I call a positive angle. So we want to either be here or here for as long as possible, right? So what we want to get is we want canoes to rise up and run across the top. We don't want to confuse that with burying a canoe and having it bounce, right? So we want to be able to discern the difference, and we're going to do a drill that's going to make that really obvious. You're going to see it right off the bat. So we want to get to the point where we can get the boat up and planing on the top rather than pushing and bobbing up and down in the bottom. We want positive angle for as long as possible, right? So the work being done is we want all of our work being done from here through here. If we can do it from here through here for a longer amount of time, better, right? Once we get here, we don't want to do any more work. We want to be done, right? That's when you're relaxing. But now when you're seated in an OC1, it can be a little bit more disruptive to immediately jerk out at this point, right? Because what you're doing is you're coming through and we're moving, and we learned that now that we're moving, there's friction, there's drag. We want to reduce that drag. Now think of what your paddle's doing. You pull through here, you stop pulling, and you start to try and release. That's a lot of brakes going on if you try to release this way until you get it totally released and out, right? Your forward momentum putting on the brakes until it gets all the way out. So what you can do is, and it seems counterintuitive, because it seems like I'm telling you to leave it in longer for more brake, but if it's back here, right, if we're thinking about it traveling through space this way, traveling through water this way, there's less surface area, right, being offered, so it's actually less drag. So you can let it come back as long as you're not pulling, and then you can release back here. So it's less.
Floats up.
Absolutely right. It's literally going to pop out and kick out. Because what's going to happen is the buoyancy of the paddle and the weight coming off of your hull are going to kick it out for you. It's going to release for you. So it's going to be back here. We're not pulling back here. We're just going to let it kick out. All right. So again, if you learn it this way, go ahead and feel free to do it that way, because that's what your coach has you doing in the 6-man. Go for it. What I'm saying, there is an alternative that's maybe a little less disruptive. And this is just from a mechanical standpoint, and this is the key. Buried, we want it buried underwater, looking like this through here. All right, if it's way up here, through here, again, that's going to come down to your individual technique. If it's here, through here, fine. A good rule of thumb that I think most coaches would agree to is at your pedals, be buried at your pedals, and then finish. So we're all okay with that first undeniable truth, that in order to move the canoe up on a plane and move it forward, we need to do positive work, and that's related to the paddle. Now you can get it there by your own individual style. If the technique you've been taught is a big rotation that pushes the shoulder forward, great. If the technique you've learned is more square, or you do it by bending the towel, great, whatever. I'm not here to pick apart any of those techniques. What I'm here is that we all agree that this angle, however we get it, is what we're looking for every single stroke. Agreed? Okay, perfect. We're halfway there. We're halfway there. All right. Now that we've got that, and we know that that's what moves the canoe in the direction that we want, right? That's where we do the most efficient work, is in that little area. Now, we really want to be efficient, and we want to use the appropriate muscles. So, paddling is primarily about the upper body, right? No. Oh, you guys are good. No, not at all. Not at all. Yeah, first time you saw it, especially if you saw people in a 6-man, you're probably like, man, I bet their arms get tired. If you learn to paddle properly, you know that arms have little to do with it. Because you want to have good connection and good transference, you are going to use less arm, less shoulder. And again, this gets kind of touchy because this would start to get into technique a little bit, but what we want to do is we want to learn today, some of the drills we're going to do, we want to learn to use our legs as much as possible. So we're going to do a couple of drills that are going to get us to do that. So the first thing that we want to agree on is, and we want to have positive work. Now that we have positive work, what is going to move our canoe up to and hopefully beyond that paddle? And the answer to that is the big muscles, right? You want to use legs. We want to use the entirety of your midsection, that magical core, right? That buzzword, your lats. We want to get away from, obviously, your biceps, your rear delts. Little muscles, they burn out, they don't do a whole lot. So, how are we going to do that? Well, we're going to do a drill out there. All right, we're going to do 2 specific drills that are going to help us with this. The first one is we want to get used to, we all agreed, the canoe is what moves, not the paddle. So, we're going to plant that paddle with that positive angle that we talked about. All right, where you're going to pretend, right, we've all agreed that we're going to do this, and we're going to pretend that it does not move. What we want to do from this point is, once it's planted here, basically what we're doing is we are an extension of the canoe. Specifically, our hips are an extension of the canoe. We want to get our hips up to here, right? So how are we going to do that? Well, if you didn't think about it, if you didn't know anything about paddling, right, and I just put a pole here in the ground, and I sat your ass on a skateboard, and I had you grab that pole, what would you do to get forward?
Like a pole vaulter.
Right? Exactly, like a pole vaulter. What would be the movement generally? You would throw your hips forward, right? You would try to, if I said, move this skateboard as far as you can, get it as far past this pole in the ground as possible, you would throw your hips forward. So you would grab, you would use as many muscles as you possibly could, right? You would instinctively use your lats, you would instinctively use the entirety of your mid-body, you would instinctively throw your hips forward. You would push the hips, and you would probably end up just like somebody on a toboggan. You would throw your whole body back, right? Your shoulders would come back. You would throw everything forward. Now that's not great technique, right? But what that illustrates is using your entire body. Paddling is not about one specific muscle or 2 specific muscles or a couple of muscles. It's about learning to connect everything. We want to connect this paddle to this canoe.